Alright, welcome back to another video. So today I want to cover the top 6 beginner photography mistakes to avoid. So all of these mistakes I had to learn the hard way. So hopefully this video can help you avoid them on your own photography journey. So let's just jump straight in with mistake number 1, and that is bad compositions. So this is something I see beginner photographers really struggle with, but this is a simple fix once you know what to look out for. So these days I see a lot of beginners capture these really busy compositions that make it really hard for our viewers to know what to look at. And it's our job as photographers to be intentional with every element within our images. So as you can see in these photos, just by being intentional with our photography and removing certain elements out of our frame, we are able to capture more balanced and visually appealing images. So by simplifying your compositions, we are able to produce cleaner images, and we are reducing the chance of any resistance for our viewers to locate our subjects. So some ways to easily simplify our compositions is by waiting for a few minutes for a crowd of people to move out of the frame, by switching the angle to help cut out some of the unwanted objects, moving your subjects, or by manually removing the objects in post-production. Another common composition mistake I see beginners make is not creating depth in their images. So I do have a free photography training that goes into this topic deeper, but it's so important to create depth in your images because it helps add dimensions to our photos and in return makes our images look a lot more cinematic. There are many different ways we can easily add depth to our photos, but the main one I want to cover in this video is adding foreground elements. So if we take a look at this photo here, instead of just having a standard portrait photo, I position my lens in front of these cherry blossom branches to help add this foreground element. And then with these 3 elements of the background, subject, and foreground, I've easily created a 3-dimensional image. These foreground elements can be anything, so get creative with this one. But if you are interested in learning more about this and the different ways I create depth in my images, I'm running a free photography masterclass that you can check out by hitting the link in the description below. Okay, moving on to mistake number 2, and that is blurry photos. So this one here is something I see all beginner photographers struggle with, and it's such a crucial step to capturing professional looking images. So like we've spoken about in previous videos, there are 3 main things we have to do to ensure tack sharp images. So number 1, fast enough shutter speed, using the correct focus mode, and steady hands. So I won't go too into detail with each one, but let's just do a quick overview. So when shooting subjects that are not moving, be sure to have your shutter speed set to a minimum of double your focal length. So for example, if you're shooting with a 50mm lens, make sure your shutter speed is set to a minimum of 1/50. If you're shooting with a 200mm lens, then your shutter speed should be set to a minimum of 1/200th of a second. And again, this number should be the absolute minimum, and if the lighting conditions allow, the higher the better. Now, when shooting moving subjects, this can differ a lot depending on how fast your subject is moving. But an absolute minimum you should be aiming for is a shutter speed of around 1/400th of a second when shooting moving subjects. Ideally, a shutter speed of 1/1000 is something you should strive for if the lighting conditions allow. Now moving on to the focus modes. When shooting moving subjects, use the continuous autofocus mode. When shooting still subjects, use the single shot mode. When shooting through something like a fence, use manual focus. And lastly, steady hands. So make sure you're correctly holding your camera and that your elbows are tucked in. Also, try to slow down and properly compose your images. This will really help you avoid any camera shake and will assist you in capturing tack sharp images. A great accessory that can help combat the shake that can occur when pressing the shutter is a shutter release button. So this cheap and simple accessory is something I recommend all photographers to pick up, and it's something I have on all my cameras. I've left a link below if you are interested in picking one up for yourself. Okay, moving on to mistake number 3, and that is bad lighting. So as you may have already heard, lighting is arguably the most important aspect of photography. And without good lighting, it won't matter how well composed your image is or how expensive your camera is, your photo is not going to look good. With that being said, lighting is one of the hardest things to learn as a photographer, and this took me years to get my head around. But with that being said, some quick ways to get better lighting in your images are to not shoot at midday and to aim to shoot during the golden hours of the day. So that's the hour after after sunrise and the hour before sunset. The reason this golden hour light looks so good is because firstly, the sun's angle is lower in the sky, meaning it's not shining from an unflattering angle like it does during midday. The midday sun is usually above us, and this angle of light can cause strong shadows, especially when shooting models. Also, the colors of the sky during midday are not as vibrant as the sky during sunrise or sunset, and this can lead to an overall less dynamic image. Another tip when shooting during golden hour is to shoot into the sun, because when done correctly, it gives you the opportunity to capture some powerful silhouettes and can allow us to shape the light in our images. Also, backlighting your subjects can allow for even lighting across your model's face, which will help you capture more flattering portraits. Backlighting your portraits will also give the halo effect, which is this rim of light that outlines and separates them from the background. So I highly recommend when out shooting portraits during golden hour to shoot with the sun behind your subjects. But to be able to pull this off correctly, you want to use a reflector to help bounce some of that light back onto your subjects' faces. So you can pick up a cheap reflector off of Amazon for about $20, and this simple cheap piece of gear will actually improve your photography. I've left a link to the one I use below if you're interested in checking that out. Okay, moving on to mistake number 4, and that is using the wrong lens. So something you need to understand is different lenses cause different looks and feelings in your images. So for example, you can see the shape of the face and background changes from lens to lens, and this is happening because of the different distortion and compression that each lens gives off. So knowing which lens to use for the right situation is so crucial to improve your photography. So currently my favorite lens I personally own and use is my Sigma 14-24mm, and this is an ultra wide angle lens. And I use this lens when shooting landscapes and architecture, because it allows me to fit so much in the frame when shooting on the wide end at 14mm, but then it allows me to quickly zoom into 24mm, which is a focal length that I've recently been shooting more contextual styled portraits with. But when choosing a lens for yourself, you need to think about what type of photography will you mainly be shooting. Because if you're planning on shooting mostly portraits of models, then an ultra wide lens is probably not right for you. So for example here, this photo was taken at 14mm, and as you can see, it's causing my subject's face to be really thin and long. And this is happening because of the distortion that occurs from shooting with these ultra wide angle lenses. And this is the main reason why it's not recommended to use lenses under 24mm for portraits. So it's believed that shooting at a focal range between 70 and 100mm is the most flattering for a human's face. And even though I mentioned my 14-24mm lens is my favorite to use, my 24-70 is actually the most used lens I own because of the focal ranges it covers. So a 24mm zoom lens will cover majority of the shots you are after, and I personally use this lens for majority of my paid work, ranging from product photography, portraits, fashion, and sports. And this is the main reason why a general zoom lens ranging from 24-70, 24-105, or even 18-55 is a lens I recommend all beginners to purchase first and practice with. These lenses will allow you to practice shooting at different focal lengths, and the more experience you get shooting, the more you'll gravitate towards a certain focal range, and that will help start defining your unique style in photography. Okay, moving on to mistake number 4, and this one is more dedicated to portrait photos, but cropping at the joints. So this is another one I was totally guilty of when I first started shooting portraits, and the problem with doing this is it makes our subjects' limbs look like they don't extend outside the border of our photos, and trust me, this won't lead to good compositions. Okay, moving on to mistake number 5, and that is too much or not enough editing. So this one is a controversial one, and this is just my personal opinion, but over or under editing is something that screams beginner more than anything. Just remember that our edits should enhance our images, not completely take over it. So some common editing sliders I see beginners overuse is the saturation, contrast, sharpening, and clarity sliders. So I highly recommend pulling back from these, and just remember that less is more when editing. Now on the other hand, not enough editing can also be a problem, because if we don't correct things like the vibrance and basic exposure of our images, our photos can start to look very flat and dull. So my advice is, when editing, try to keep your photos looking natural and your edits subtle. Okay, now moving on to the last beginner photography mistake, and that is focusing too much on the gear. So sure, having the newest and flashiest camera and lens can definitely help you take better images, but when it comes to the actual craft and art of photography, gear doesn't matter, your photography vision does. So your creative vision is how you see the world as a photographer, and it's what will allow you to see and capture eye-catching compositions in even boring locations. And simply put, your vision can be broken down into 3 main pillars. So number 1 is visual language. So this is things like composition, light, and all the other visual elements that blend together to make an image what it is. Number 2 is intention. So this is what type of emotion or story you are intentionally trying to communicate to your viewers. And number 3 is observation. And this is the actual act of noticing these ideas and moments in real time so you can then capture them. So I have a full course breaking this and many other topics that you can check out in the description below. But my biggest advice for all beginners, not to focus on the gear until you have begun to develop your vision as a photographer. Just remember, gear doesn't matter until it does. Alright, so that wraps up this one. I hope you found some of these tips useful. As always, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below and I'll catch you in the next one.